Yo! Video games.
What up, dudes? Matt here from YoVideogames, and I'm back again with another review, and it's the big one this time. It's the game that everyone has become obsessed over and addicted to, hey, myself included, and that is Elden Ring. Can you even imagine it? Well, I can imagine it. In fact, I've beaten it, and I've actually completed a fair number of the optional bosses, though I shouldn't go out of my way to say right away, this game is like 90% optional content. But anyways, yeah, that includes beating, the big rotted queen or whatever. I don't want to give away too many spoilers or names, but you know what I'm talking about. Anyways, yeah, Elden Ring's out. It's done and dusted. It's been out a month. I've completed it. I got to level 165 or so. And I just thought, you know what, I'm not really a Souls guy, and hey, maybe this would be an opportunity to really talk about, Elden Ring as someone who completed the game, did a lot of the stuff in the game, and as someone who's generally not been all that up and up on the franchise, or the subgenre as a whole. So, a little backstory with me is that I've owned Bloodborne. I do own that game. I never beat it. And I never purchased or completed any of the other From Software Soulsborne style games. And there were always kind of like two things that really got me hung up on them. And that was loading and checkpoints. And they actually both have the same problem, which is time. Waiting around for the game to reload after a death got really annoying to me. And then the checkpointing, which would usually always, involve running back, minutes, anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes of just running straight back to a boss, after a death, it just really annoyed me because you wouldn't even encounter enemies. You'd actually just run past everything once you knew where the boss was. And here's the thing about Elden Ring. It actually fixes both of those. One of those from a technical perspective, and one of them from just a design perspective. And when I mean technical, I mean I'm playing this on PS5. I had an the M2 solid state drive, so the loading is just almost instantaneous. It's really good. It's not like 2 seconds or whatever like some games, but it is very quick. So it solves that problem. And so that's on the technical side of things. And on the design side, this game is just very good about checkpoints. There's not only is there bonfires always right next to the boss's time, there's also what are called Stake of Marika's, which are just general checkpoints. You when you die, they ask you, do you want to go back to your last bonfire? Do you want to go back to this checkpoint, which is almost always right in front of a boss, and that's fantastic. But I feel like I'm getting a little bit too ahead of myself. So let's just overall take it in. What is Elden Ring? It's an open world style game that uses the mechanics and controls and sort of design philosophy of a typical Dark Souls style game. And kind of it's peanut butter and chocolate kind of put together. Which was interesting because a lot of people were kind of afraid at first, hey, will this work out? Because the map design of the Souls games are actually very intricate and they're very thoughtfully and carefully planned, and then dumping this into an open world kind of feels like an invitation to sort of lose the sort of masterwork map design that the Souls series was known for. And thankfully, that actually turned out to not be the case at all. This was actually a very well done designed open world. And in fact, it kind of blends the two together where, yes, there is an open world aspect and there's a sort of go anywhere, nature of it, but that actually becomes a benefit because then you're not really stuck in one spot, and you're just sort of I'm just kind of grinding and beating my head against a wall. You can actually just go and leave and go off and go do an adventure somewhere else. But the other thing is that the game is designed around these sort of, I would call them mainline dungeons almost. Well, mainline dungeons would be okay, here's this castle, or here's this academy, or whatever. And there's whole giant chunks of this area that are gated off, and you're supposed to do a very specific thing, or they have a very specific entrance to go in, and then it's you're playing a huge chunk of a Dark Souls game. So they actually take what are huge portions of a map, and they make that basically one big large dungeon area with a mainline boss that you have to conquer in them. It's actually very smartly done. And to go on, I could praise this map a lot too, because I think the other biggest, smartest thing about this game is that every single area of the game has something useful in it. Not just unique, but useful. whether that be stuff to increase your health, stuff to increase your stamina, stuff to increase your magic, and then stuff for buffing your stats, stuff for like giving you experience buffers, like every little area of the game. Not every nook and cranny is useful, but like every area of the map, of the world map, and design of it, there is something good everywhere in the game. There's not wasted space in that sense. That being said, is the entire map like just nothing but brimming with expertly designed stuff? No, there's definitely a lot of dead space on the map. And then when you look at, when you first start the game, you think, oh, wow, this is pretty big. And then you unlock a chunk, like, wow, this is really big. And then every time you unlock more of the world map, it just seems to get exponentially bigger and bigger and bigger. And then it becomes daunting. But when you actually do unlock the full world map, you kind of realize that a shit ton of the actual world map itself is not traversable. A lot of it is water. And then there's a massive amount of what is technically drawn, because the map has like a hand-drawn, style world map that you look at, when you're quick warping to different locations. You kind of realize, like, there's a lot of stuff on the map that's actually not part of the game world at all. Like, it's drawn as, like, a rocky slope of something, but it's not actually something you can walk on at all. Like, if you even tried, the game would literally just phase you out of existence and say you died. So, yeah, the map is daunting at first, but when you finally uncover the whole thing, it becomes a lot more manageable, and in a good way. It doesn't feel like, oh my god, I'll never see the end of this game. It's like, oh, I can actually start planning my routes. I can actually start seeing where there are ways to go or things to discover here and there. And it's not that daunting. It just feels daunting at first, and that's, I think, by design, and it's very well done because, it introduces you to basically large chunks of discoverable lands at a time, and then you sort of like, you have no idea how big the world is, what's in the world. Like, you don't you don't get a lot of, there's a couple moments, there's like one area where you can kind of get a good landscape view of all the different like major locations, but like you don't really have that, from the get-go. Like when you start the game, it's just like, okay, you end up in like this plains, like this sort of foresty, grassy, wooded area, but you don't have a ton of landmarkers everywhere. Eventually we will get to a point where, like, okay, I can kind of start seeing all the crazy shit that's in this game, and then kind of like marking your way out. But anyways, talking a little bit too much about the map design, but hey, I really like that stuff. All that being said is, the map is great. There's definitely variety there. It is still a dark fantasy game, so you're not going to find any sort of like tropical beaches, and you're not going to find anything that's too overtly modern or anything like that. Like, everything is just very obviously very medieval styled or whatever. But they do plenty within that to sort of, okay, we have definitely a sort of setting, which is a medieval Europe, and we basically cover all the bases, everything from forests to snowy peaks to even a volcano. And then they get a little bit crazy a bit with like one area that's like corrupted. And that area is very, very unique and stands out on its own. And then there's even crazier shit that, you get into way into the end game. So, they do have plenty of variety. There's not a lack of stuff. Like, you're not gonna like look at stuff and go like, oh, well, this area is just the same as that. Like, maybe some of the last three areas are kind of the same exact, landscape, but yeah, whatever. I think what does really go a long way towards this game is that it's the art. And the art is fantastic. It really makes up for a lot, because this game was announced originally as a PS4 Xbox game, and then next-gen versions got added later. And obviously it doesn't look anywhere near as good on a technical level as Demon Souls, the remake for the PS5. But, what this game doesn't have in the technical aspect, it more than makes up for in the art. And there's just some fantastic, artistic, vistas and views and just sort of like art design. I can't say enough good things about that. If you're not a big fan of medieval fantasy, dark fantasy aesthetic, this game may not do much to change your mind, but I would be hard pressed to find anyone who would look at some of the areas and some of the spots of this game and not think, wow, that looks really good, because it really does. It's definitely a bit of an art over technology, and you can see that a lot, where like really no version of this game is truly optimized well. In fact, the smoothest playing experience, especially at launch, was playing the PS4 version on a PlayStation 5 console, which I regret to myself that I didn't do that. I just went straight for the PS5 version, which actually runs worse than if I had played the PS4 version on the PS5. So there's a bit of that. Like, that's probably one of like the biggest, and that's crazy to think that that's probably one of the biggest nitpicks of this game, is that the optimization is just bad. For a lot of people, it's really easy to overlook. I think the overall experience absolutely kind of washes over any of the poor optimization. But I will say this, as someone who did play through the entirety of the game on a PlayStation 5 on the PS5 version, there's definitely some stuttering and hiccups. Every so often, it will cause problems. The biggest problems become in effects-heavy bosses, where sometimes the game just loses inputs or doesn't read. And I noticed it, in some bosses over others, where it was just very late or just completely lost a roll button press completely. And it seemed to be, if certain effects heavy bosses, I was fighting, it was those ones in particular where it's like, wow, this is, for some reason, I'm having trouble like having, moves come out or button presses be registered. So I gotta admit, like, okay, yes, there definitely was a few instances where some of the more crazy effects-heavy bosses do have an effect on the button input and latency, and it's a problem. And I don't think it's something that you can ignore and say, well, this doesn't matter at all. It kind of does, like not to the extent that like it in any way ruined the game experience in any way, shape, or form, but like it was noticeable. It was unfortunate, but like they are patching the game. Like there's been at least 2 so far, so there is that going for it. So optimization is just sort of kind of an issue here. It really is. Like I can't really ignore that aspect of it. And it's a little unfortunate as well, because it's been, a number of years, and there's been a number of successes and a lot of money, all the successes of all the games leading up to this. And it's kind of unfortunate that FromSoft still wasn't able to find a way to really optimize this game on really any platform at all. Granted, they are, it is a game that is on Xbox, PlayStation, and PC, but like none of them are running perfectly. And that's just really unfortunate, because again, technically it's not mind-blowing. It's not pushing any boundaries as far as technical stuff goes, graphically or whatever, but yeah, that's there. That's something we gotta talk about and admit to. But as far as like, as the rest of the game design goes, like with sort of combat and everything, it's exactly what you think it is. It plays exactly like Dark Souls. It uses like the exact same user interface, uses the exact same kind of like button schemes, and like combat is pretty much exactly the same. And some might want to throw about the laziness aspect, and for me it's a little bit more like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And at no point during this game's development did they ever try to insinuate that they were trying to make a breakaway thing. I mean, it's called Elden Ring. It's not called Dark Souls 4, but they could have easily called this Dark Souls 4 and no one would have batted an eye. So, it's the same publisher, it's the same developer, and they're using a lot of the same stuff, but the idea is that, like, hey, we are trying an open world aspect, and that's the biggest key difference here, is that, okay, it is very much everything a Dark Souls and an open world, and they've never really been shy about saying what that is. Like, there's like, okay, George R.R. Martin had a hand in writing the backstory to the game, but I mean, it's a Souls game. Like, you really gotta dig so hard to find the backstory. Anyways, it almost wouldn't have mattered. Like, it's a strange collaboration, because it doesn't really lead to anything new or unique for a From Software game in a way. But yeah, like, there's that going for it. I guess we jump into like music. I think this is good. Like, some of the boss themes are fantastic, and then some of them are just okay. I appreciate that there's a small like ambient music, not just noises. Like, it isn't a completely dead silent game. Like, there's always a little bit of a music theme running through every area, and they are different depending on the area, and I appreciate that, but it's not mind-blowing. It's not really standoutish. I think the weirdest thing to me is, like, I look at a game like Bloodborne, and it feels like every single boss has an amazing, awe-inspiring, song that or theme that goes with it. And there's a lot of that in Dark Souls as well. But here it's like some of the bosses live up to the quality standard of the rest of the franchise, and some of the boss themes are just kind of like, they're okay, like nothing like mind-blowing. So I actually think in a way like it's still good, but it's a little, I feel, on the sort of weaker end of the totem of From Software musical, score pieces, at least in this game. But there is some really smart, sound design stuff. There's a lot of the same sound effects you're used to. But I think one of the craziest things for me, this is really not like, this is not like saying anything critically, but like I just thought it was interesting to point out there are these harpies in the game, and they're male, and they sing, and they have this amazingly beautiful, as some people have called them, the Midnight Mass bats. So you got like these weird bat-like humanoid creatures who, when left alone and you'll just be walking through an area and you'll hear someone singing some beautiful, church-like, choir-like song. You're like, where is that coming from? What is it? And it's coming from these crazy harpy-like creatures that will wreck your shit, if you get into a fight with them. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. Like, there's some really cool musical touches in the game, as far as that goes. As far as like the actual combat and difficulty, I know I touched a little bit on the optimization. I have heard some talk about that the boss encounters are like, the bosses have a little bit too long of strings. I don't really know. This is where I'm a little uneducated here a bit, where I have seen from some Souls fans kind of talk about how like a lot of the bosses, especially like the later half of the game, their combo strings or their attack strings just go on way too long. Like they're way longer than other bosses. And I think, okay, maybe that's true. I can definitely see that being an issue. And I think the other weird thing is that like even at a level 150 and heavily focusing your stats into attack and defense, you're still going to encounter regular enemies who will two-shot you without much trouble on the world map. Like dogs alone can still kill you at 100. There is a bit of like, my God, the enemies hit almost like you're playing like Ninja Gaiden Black or on the original Xbox. Like, it is something I kind of noticed. It does make leveling up feel weirdly trivial a little bit, because you can be a level 150 and you're at the proper level to beat the bosses. It's kind of like everything in the game is a glass cannon. I think what offsets this is that, if you have you have the right equipment, you have the right stuff, bosses are going to take damage pretty decently. You're going to die in 2 hits from everything or whatever, but like everything kind of like hurts. But that extends a little bit where like it's not like, okay, you could have the best weapon in the game and you could have the best weapon like fully leveled up and you're hitting the boss and it's doing no damage. You have to very slowly chip away. You don't really have that problem in this game. Like if you have good weapons and you level up the weapons through smithing, all the way up, and you're going to hit the boss and you're going to notice chunks of life going away from them. So, it's kind of like a, hit hard, get hit hard kind of game. So I think that's a little offset, but yeah, it is noticeable. It's like, my God, like everything hurts in this game really hard. And to me, I'm like, yeah, you just kind of get used to it. Again, the checkpointing and the loading is so good that I don't care anymore. Like, it's whatever. Like, yes, things hurt. You just got to learn how to like avoid them. It feels a bit like Marvel 3 in that aspect where, just don't get hit. That kind of just becomes the game. And there's definitely plenty of things in the game to sort of help you, buff yourself up and like, try to, lessen the impact of stuff. There's lots of stuff in the game. I will say that, another beautiful thing about this game is much like other Dark Souls games, there's many ways to play this game. There's many types of weapons. There's many types of gameplay variety. If you want to go, with a sword and shield, like you want to focus on a little bit more defense, have some defense with offense, a mix. You want to go all offense. You want to go all magic. Like the game is good about that. Like there's a lot of different ways to play the game, and they're not. And so far, I haven't seen any. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of things that are just useless, but it feels like, okay, if you focus into any one strategy, like you can make it work, and that's the beauty of the game. Like, you know, nothing's gonna be nothing's gonna be a cakewalk necessarily, but the nice thing about the game is that it does feel like there's a huge variety of ways to play the game, how you want to build yourself up, and that's carried over from previous entries into this one, and I think it does its job very well in that aspect. So, yeah, I don't really have any complaints about that. And then, if anything. And getting down to it, is there actually any one thing that I truly think misses the mark a bit in Elden Ring? And that is, yes, there is, and I'm going to take a little explaining, and that is some of the bosses, including some of the mandatory ones, are too big. And that wouldn't be a problem except for the fact that here's the real, honest-to-God, biggest issue with this game, is the camera and how the camera, more specifically, how the camera relates to certain sized bosses. There's some of them where the camera just doesn't know what to do, and you end up kind of like the lock-on becomes like an actual, honest-to-God issue with the camera kind of like wildly swinging back and forth. Some bosses are too big and put in too small of a room, and then they do too crazy of a jumping up, flying around, spinning in the air, come back down animation, and the camera just doesn't know what to do sometimes. And there have been plenty of times where I actually beat bosses not even really knowing what I was doing, because either the wall or just scenery in general in a small room with a big boss, and I just kind of like, I don't know what's going on. I just see a lot of blobby stuff moving around, and I just spam the attack button, and the boss died, and I'm like, I won, I guess, I don't know. So there's definitely some stuff in the game where, you know, you will be like, okay, like the camera just isn't working sometimes. So yeah, I feel like that's probably the one huge flaw with this game, is that some of these boss encounters don't really work with the camera, and it would have worked if they had just massively shifted the camera back. Like sometimes you're in a small room, like underground, so I guess I get why you can't really do that there. But there are some bosses that are very large and out in the open air, and the camera just stays so close to your character, and you have to run up, unless you're doing nothing but like projectile magic. You have to go up and you have to hit them, and you have to like go and gnaw at their ankles. And the camera just has a huge problem keeping up, and everything just kind of just becomes like a guessing game of what the enemy's doing, because you can't actually see it. You're only seeing like a portion of it. And yeah, unfortunately, this does go into mandatory fights, and it does kind of become an issue. And it's an issue that I feel like could have been alleviated, you know, in the testing phase or in the design phase, where I'm like, okay, this is something that I feel like, I don't think they designed the camera to be this obtuse, and I almost feel bad, because like you look at some of these giant boss creatures and they have fantastic, beautiful animations when you're far enough away to see them, but when you're actually fighting the damn thing, you know, you're not actually seeing anything that's going on with the boss creature, and it almost feels like the animators are kind of getting like, you know, shunted a bit, where it's like, man, like I spent all this time designing this boss to do this crazy thing, and you don't even know what you're seeing, because the camera just can't keep up, or is like way too closed in. So that's where like I think the honest to God like biggest problem with the game came in, is that like the camera's not great in some of the boss situations, and the optimization is not great, and it kind of leads to some lost inputs and some latency there, and those are like the two biggest gripes. And to be honest, that's kind of amazing that those are the only real honest to God things that I have any real problem with. The other problem I have with the game comes in the form of some of the patching, where there is things that have been patched, nerfed and buffed and nerfed and whatever, for things that are only specifically for single player. And what I mean is, in the game, when you invade or get invaded, certain types of moves, particularly summons, are locked out. And for whatever reason, From Software has decided that some summons are too good. So even though you can't use these in multiplayer, they have no effect on PvP or PvE. It only affects people by themselves, playing the game alone at home. They've decided this is too good for you. I'm taking this away. And I feel this actually goes counter to the design philosophy of Elden Ring and From Software in general. It goes against exactly what Miyazaki himself said in the statement he made when the game launched about like we want people to go around, discover secrets, and share them. And that's kind of like there's this wonderful, beautiful social aspect to the game, which is exemplified in the game with the note system, with the invasion system, and I actually don't even play with that. But like just for me, I'm just talking to people, online through various social media style things or whatever, and everyone's just kind of going through and discovering stuff, and that's sort of like the beauty of the From Software games. It's very much like being a kid again, and you're on the playground and you're sharing all these things where like you have rumors and you have like discoveries and people are sharing them, and some of them are bull and some of them are real and some of them you don't know, and you have to go into the game yourself and find out for yourself. And when you start patching stuff that only affects single player specifically, I have a weird issue with that. I feel that why did you have something that is okay, if something is good in the game, okay, whatever. It's like Konami going back in time and issuing a patch for Contra where like the spread gun is too good. We are going to heavily nerf the spread gun in Contra because people are beating the game or doing too well with the spread gun. I just, to me, it's very much like, okay, when you want to nerf or you want to buff or debuff something that affects PvP and PvE, I kind of get it. Even if I'm not happy about it, it's like, I get it. You don't want to have like a really busted, magic spell or move that's really going to dominate the PvP aspect of it. But when it's something that, okay, if you go online and you meet another person, this entire subset of mechanics from the game is locked out because it's for single player only, why are you changing that? It feels like you're sort of punishing the people who discovered something good and then shared it with everyone else. And now all the people who have used the discovery that was a secret that was shared amongst the whole collective world, now you're sort of punishing them by saying like, no, that was too good. Like your discovery was too nice. We got to stop it. It's ultimately their game and they can do what they want. And I'm not going to advocate saying like, publishers shouldn't be allowed to patch single player stuff like that. I'm not saying that. It's more just kind of like, man, I don't know. I feel very conflicted and sort of like it just feels like it's going against the very idea and nature of this sort of filling the game with secrets and then people discovering them and then sharing them, and then you're taking that away by saying, oh no, you know what, that was too good. We're sorry. We need to adjust that. Take that away from you single player only people. I don't know. It's a very weird, odd feeling. I don't know how I feel about it. I don't feel great about it actually. But I know that one's going to be up for debate a lot, and I don't think it necessarily hurts the game much. Like, for me, it kind of does a little bit, but, like, there's also another wonderful aspect where it's like, okay, I just I stop the game from updating. I take out the internet cable when it wants to update, and I'm like, yeah, you can do that. You can play it strictly from the disc. I don't, there is always that aspect to it, I guess, if you wanted to. But yeah, like, those are, like, the only real honest-to-God issues I really have with the game. There's more personal stuff where, if I'm being 100% honest, about half of the map I don't really care about. There's a rotten, I guess you could say a land of rot, which takes up way too much space and has way too much good stuff in it, and I hate going there. I hate exploring there. I have no desire to be in that part of the world, and there's so much good stuff in there, you kind of have to. And then I don't really personally care that much about a whole giant chunk of the map being snowy and rocky. Doesn't do anything for me. And then there's like a whole kind of like volcano area that's just sort of a pain to navigate. So about half of the map I don't really care that much about actually going around. It feels kind of like more of a chore to get around in. But that's a personal thing, and I don't think that should in any way, shape, or form affect the game, because some people will absolutely love like exploring the rotted land, the countryside, of Tyranno dogs and warded birds and stuff. And some people will actually really love that. So again, that's a very personal thing where I'm like, I'm not really thrilled about how a huge chunk of the map is dedicated to this style, but like some people will really love it. So that's kind of like it. That's a little bit like your mileage may vary a bit there, and I don't think it in any way, shape, or form affects the total sum of the game. I think the only things that really truly do affect the game whatsoever are some of the boss design and encounters, including some of the mandatory ones. The camera just kind of sucks, and it feels like they really should have rethought positioning of the camera for some of these fights, or maybe just rethought the boss in general. Like, it just doesn't work like at all for me. And then again, the optimization is, it's a little wonky. And you know, again, the best way to play this game, at least at launch, was playing the PS4 version on a PlayStation 5, which is not something a lot of people can do because no one can find the damn thing. So it was really unfortunate to see, like, you know, yeah, even the PC version was not really that optimized, and even for people with, like, the highest caliber rigs, you know, they had to jump through some hoops to get it to play, you know, super smoothly. I don't know. I feel like the only, like, actual honest-to-God criticisms I can really level at the game are, like, the camera's not great in some of the boss encounters, and the optimization really feels a little bit like, really wish this was better. The optimization can be fixed, though. That might get fixed over time. There is that possibility. So we'll see about that. But overall, like, how do I feel about the game? You know, total, personal, and critical. I feel like I would honestly give this game a 9, like a 9 out of 10. I feel it's better than any game I played last year whatsoever. Like, this was easy Game of the Year material. If this game came out, say, December 31st, you know, 2021, it would have been the best game I played in all of 2021. We'll see. You know, this is a big year for video games. We'll see how it stacks up with the rest of the year. It's the best game I've played this year, you know, for what that's worth. We'll see how you know, things continue to shake out. But as someone who kind of was never really all that enamored with the From Software style of action RPGs before, I feel this game fixes a lot of my personal gripes I had with the games, namely the loading and the running back and the checkpointing, which is all just becomes giant time wasters. And this game really fixes that issue for me. And I think, you know, that plus the open world nature of, like, okay, if you ever feel like you're just getting stuck or you're just tired of being, you know, trying to beat one boss or being stuck in one area, you can leave that area and you can go and wander around and discover. And there's, you know, almost the entire game world in some way, shape, or form can be accessed on foot if you just search around enough. So I feel like that's a huge benefit to this game, is the fact that, like, okay, you never feel like you're stuck in a cave or in a catacomb or in this swamp. You can leave that cave or that swamp and you can just go somewhere else and you can do something else, and you can, all the while, you're going to continue to level yourself up and discover new things. So that is the sort of, like, general beauty of the game. So yeah, I think this was a fantastic game, and I've seen a lot of people who are, like, completely brand new to the subgenre, like, really embrace this game and have a great time, and I think that's going to be true for a lot of people. I think it's well worth at least taking, you know, a rental if you can. I don't know if that even exists anymore, but, like, if you could find some way to play from a friend's copy or play from a rental, you know, if you're just on the fence about it, because, you know, it does a lot of things, I think, to really make the game appealing to people who maybe weren't into it as much before. You know, is you know, whether or not is the game too hard for some people? I'm like, well, I mean, it is hard, but, like, there are ways and routes and things you can do from the very beginning of the game to make the game much easier for yourself and more manageable. And some people are like, well, that breaks the game too much, or that's too easy. I'm like, well, play how you want. That's the beauty of this game. I think it's a fantastic title overall. I do wish some of the boss encounters, with almost entirely in regards to the camera, were a little better thought out. And I do wish that the performance, especially on a PlayStation 5 version of the game, I wish that was a lot better than it is. But other than that, this is a fantastic game. You know, it's easily going to be in contention, you know, for obviously top 10, probably top 5, probably maybe even top 3 already. I could even confidently say probably, like, definitely top 5, probably, and top 3 is definitely going to be up there for me this year. We'll see. I don't want to say anything because there's a lot of big games coming out this year, so we'll see what shakes out for me personally. But this is a 9 out of 10, and I really enjoyed it, and I really think if you've all been on the fence with these games before, this might be the one to do it. This might just have enough things in it that might just be for you, you know, to check it out. And, you know, I highly recommend giving it a shot. You know, Elden Ring, it is a fantastic time. Beginning to end, I actually really enjoyed almost everything about it. You know, there's a tiny couple other nitpicks, you know, here and there, but whatever. Check the game out. I think, you know, you might actually find you enjoy this one, even if you didn't like the other ones. And let me know what you guys think, and I will see you on the channel. Later, dudes.